If you've read the recent CNN article about protein powders and heavy metals, you're probably wondering, wait, should I be tossing my post-workout shakes? Take a breath. I got you, friend. I'm Colleen, a PA, dietitian, and your nutrition mentor. Welcome to the Exam Room Nutrition Podcast, your guide to giving better nutrition advice. Today, I'm unpacking the entire article, and we're discussing what the article got right, what it missed, and how to cut through the noise and understand the science so you don't fall into panic mode. Now, I asked the smartest guy I know and my go-to supplement man, Dr. Douglas Kalman, back to the show to unpack this article with me. Dr. Kalman is the co-founder and co-director, along with Dr. Susan Hewlings, of Substantiation Sciences, a strategic nutrition business consultancy. Additionally, Dr. Kalman is a co-founder of the International Society of Sports Nutrition. And today, I ask him all the questions, and even some that you submitted. We'll cover everything from how supplements are actually regulated, other sources of heavy metals that we don't even bat an eye at, what terms like isolate, concentrate, and hydrolysate actually mean, and the best way to figure out if your protein powder is safe. Now, there are tons of resources mentioned in today's episode, so check the show notes for all of the details. Also, if you love this episode, could you please tell me about it by leaving me a review in Apple Podcasts or sharing it with a colleague? I would be most grateful. Now, by the end of the episode, you'll feel calm, confident, and totally in control of your supplement game. So grab your coffee and enjoy my conversation with Dr. Kalman. Oh, Dr. Kalman, I am so excited to welcome you back to the show. Thank you so much for taking your time out of your day to discuss this very important topic. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be back.
Well, like I was saying before we hit record, this recent article from the CNN about contamination of protein powders created quite the buzz on a lot of my Facebook groups. So I wanted to unpack whether supplements are now unsafe and where is the FDA and all of this, because that's kind of what all the chatter is going on out on social media and kind of what the report sort of left out, like we were talking about. And then I really wanted to pick your brain on what do we do as clinicians to educate our patients about making informed choices about their supplements. Dr. Kalman is a repeat guest, so he already explained how supplements are in fact regulated. He gave us an at-home quality test for a few different vitamins, and there were a few other expert tips on popular supplements. For anyone who missed our previous conversation, go check out episode 73. It's called, Is That Supplement Worth It? A Clinician's Crash Course in Supplement Regulation and Safety. So after this episode, go check out that one, and I will link to it down in the show notes. I want to read the headline just in case you haven't heard about it and you wanted to follow along with us in this conversation. And then Dr. Kalman, after I read the headline and some of the highlights, I'd just love your initial response to this article. So the headline reads, over-the-counter protein powders may contain disturbing levels of lead and cadmium, with the highest amounts found in plant-based, organic, and chocolate-flavored products, according to a new investigation. It went on to say that on average, organic protein powders had 3 times more lead and twice the amount of cadmium compared to non-organic products. Plant-based powders, such as those made from soy, rice, pea, and other plants, contained 3 times more lead than whey-based products, according to the report. So what are just a few of your initial reactions to that article?
I think that the article raises a topic that is worthy of communication and discussion regarding what is it that are in our foods or our food supply, and how what is in the food supply may or may not affect health. I think that the Clean Label Project report actually does a disservice for health promotion. And what I mean by that is that, yes, the Clean Label Project report is written in such a way to be sensationalistic, to be clickbait, if you will. It's not the first report that this group has come out with, and they failed to realize and recognize and discuss in the Clean Label Project report which is called the Closer to Zero program, where there are at least 2 FDA regulations, meaning written into the Code of Federal Regulations, with respect to how much of heavy metals or other contaminants that naturally occur in soil are permitted to be in foods, and also with that, what is going on with the FDA's monitoring of foods program. A lot to unpack there. One thing is really, really very important for the listener, reader, watcher, whatever the person might be, is when you look at the Clean Label Project report, and it claims that there was no federal guidelines to use, so it defers to Prop 65, which Prop 65, for those of you that are unaware, is the law of the land within the state of California with respect to a wide variety of items that are in the diet or cosmetic or other. So the state of California has their own set of regulations with respect to heavy metals and other contaminants that are naturally found in the food supply for what is allowed to be in food. And not that they don't allow it, but the state of California has a Prop 65 warning that if you're above X threshold, you have to have a warning on your food or product. And the Prop 65 warning generally reads, this product contains an ingredient known to the state of California to cause cancer. Right? So let's take that into consideration, big picture, for any of the listeners that are, to this podcast that live in California, or next time that you, Colleen, yourself are out in the beautiful state of California, go into a coffee facility, Starbucks as an example, and actually the Prop 65 warning is on every coffee and it has to be placed. But the rest of the country doesn't have that warning. And the threshold that California uses is 1/5 the amount that the FDA uses. Now, one of the things that I will talk about is that in the FDA regulations and guidelines with respect to naturally occurring heavy metals and contaminants in the food supply, they have typically a limit of 10 parts per billion. And the emphasis is on closer to zero, especially for foods that are marketed to pregnant women, infants, and children. And that is mostly with the push to help remove and reduce the amount of things like lead that people get exposed to. One time in this country, there was leaded gas and unleaded gas. We don't have leaded gas anymore, right? There are regular concerns that any citizen and health professional should have regarding what is in our food supply. But this Clean Label Project report doesn't actually say that any of these products are really actually above the FDA threshold. They're all below the FDA threshold. And if we're using the California Prop 65 threshold of, I think it was 0.2 parts per billion, that, you're using something that is not standard for the rest of the country, nor built into anything evidence-based like the FDA has used. So I do believe that the Clean Label Project report is actually doing more harm because it's having people up in arms when they don't realize, oh, so chocolate, right, comes from cocoa, comes from the cocoa bean, where does beans grow? And so chocolate vegetarian protein powders tested high in some of these heavy metals, but not high to pass the FDA threshold, meaning still permissible. And the FDA has a program that anybody could Google called the Closer to Zero program, where part of it, in order to achieve the zero for heavy metals and contaminants in the food supply, has to include the discussion of a topic that's called remediation. And it's remediation in agricultural practices to also help offset what naturally occurs in the soil and then what humans put in the soil through what we feed the animals and plants that are on or using that soil. So there's a push in remediation agriculture as part of the FDA Closer to Zero program to help achieve lowering our exposure to these. But again, the sensational Clean Label Project report is much more clickbait than it is fact, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think so too. And, fear sells. So I'm sure they got a lot of great responses and website hits from that. But on the Facebook group, I wanted to read a comment from someone, and I would love for you to respond or maybe just provide resources for that person to go to get better information. Because I know, like I said in the intro, we did discuss supplement regulation on episode 72, but her comment was this, and I would love to hear your response. She said, the FDA has no regulation on this because it is a supplement. And due to the Dietary and Health Supplement Education Act, the FDA has no say or control over supplements. That's the issue here. There is zero regulation over these products. What would you say to respond?
That unfortunately, the person who had that or made that statement is misinformed. Dietary supplements are regulated on a federal level by the Food and Drug Administration and the Federal Trade Commission. Also, dietary supplement products are regulated by local regulations and state regulations. Dietary supplement products under the Dietary Supplement Health Education Act of 1994, the law which enabled dietary supplements to be regulated by the FDA as a subset of foods, because these are nutrients found in foods, is actually evidence of actual regulation. And also that the FDA, who regulates dietary supplements, they also regulate pharmaceuticals, they regulate drugs, they regulate medical devices, they regulate tobacco, and a wide variety of other areas, has a program in place for a threshold of what is allowed for heavy metals and contaminants to be in the food supply, especially for foods that are marketed to children, infants and children. And there's actually 2 laws codified into the Code of Federal Regulations, which means these are laws that regulate all industries that supply food, including dietary supplement, with respect to the threshold allowable for heavy metals and contaminants. And yes, the FDA acknowledges that ultimately the threshold goal is 0, but that's not reality because these are naturally occurring entities in our agricultural practices.
Yeah, excellent response. Because it is a common belief, right? A lot of people believe that supplements are not regulated. And so I think getting that information out there is very important. Now, going back to something that you said in regards to how this article was very sensationalized and it missed a few things, I wanted to get your opinion on what else you think it missed. You mentioned that it didn't really discuss that there are natural exposures to heavy metals. So in addition to that, what else did you think this article was missing to give us a more of an informed picture?
Perspective. So, for example, this article chose, obviously from the beginning, they chose that they were going to test what they labeled as dietary supplements. However, why not also test foods? So, for example, if you know that chocolate and chocolate-derived products are going to have these heavy metals and contaminants present, but you're only choosing to do chocolate pea protein product, it's not necessarily fair if you didn't go now to your supermarket and get your chocolate plant milk, if you will, right? So it's also not giving perspective if you're going to utilize Prop 65 as your threshold to state unequivocally that Prop 65 is not the law of the land, and it's actually set at a threshold that is magnitude levels of order lower than that of the FDA. I would also say that another area of the article is we often have blind faith in articles when they say research was done, but it's always worthy to check the methodology. So the methodology, for here, they used ICP and they used mass spec gas chromatography, 2 different methods, some combined, some different, for testing of these heavy metals and contaminants. And those seem to be standard methods, but not much is known about the analytical laboratory that did it. And any analytical laboratory test, you order a blood test on somebody. The laboratory that's actually analyzing that blood test, they are running reproducibility studies. They are running precision studies, right? And so we don't know the accuracy and precision of the tests that were actually done. We don't know how they fared against a standard. Was there a standard that was used? So in other words, we don't know how well machines were calibrated. We also, the laboratory, as far as I could tell from my search and searches, has not been part of any other published project outside of one other project with the Clean Label Project back in 2017. So I've been unable to find, in other words, that Ellipse Laboratories, which was the contract analytical laboratory that Clean Label Project works with on these projects, seems not to be a contract laboratory that anybody in academic or research worlds are using for anything. So that also says something. I could not find them where they would be referenced in the method section of any research paper or scientific paper anywhere, which also says something. Where if you're looking up, a variety of laboratories, Quest, of course, everybody knows, LabCorp, everybody knows, but not only do you know from your office, but they're also used in research. They're also used in hospitals. They have precision, reproducibility, accuracy. They have reputation. So there's questions also on the methodology of how products were chosen. There's questions also on, of course, the transparency of their research. I don't believe, as a peer reviewer in the academic world or scientific publishing world, the Clean Label Project report would not pass peer review. Remember, it's a report from a nonprofit organization that exists on one level to get donations so that they could stay alive for whatever their mission is. Not knocking them, but saying that you have to understand that when looking at anything that comes from any kind of a group such as this, especially when it comes to well-care or healthcare or well-being.
Yeah, those are fascinating points that I don't think a lot of people think about. And I wonder if they would have had a comparative analysis of, for like the example you had said, chocolate in the grocery store and the chocolate flavored protein powder with the heavy metals in each. I wonder if they would have compared that. Do you know if is there a comparison of, lead and these ingredients in foods versus supplements? Has anything been done like that?
Yes, the FDA has an ongoing study and a public-facing database where all the public can look at all the variety of 2,000 plus foods that the FDA does tests through market surveillance to show what is in our actual food supply. So the FDA's program is just called Testing Results for Arsenic, Lead, Cadmium, and Mercury. And it has an analytical program. It's called the FDA's Toxic Elements in Food and Foodware and Radionuclides in Food, Import and Domestic Compliance Program. And this is where they have ongoing testing. Again, I want to, for your listeners, the emphasis that the FDA has put for the last 30 years or so on these has been targeting for foods that are commonly eaten by infants and young children. And even under like Code of Federal Regulation, Section 172, there is a specific part, again, for the FDA thresholds for these items at 10 parts per billion, which if you look at the Clean Label Project, all of these foods that she cites are below the FDA threshold. All these dietary supplements, I should say.
Now, the article mentions third-party testing labels like the NSF and the USP. Now, are these certifications enough to ensure safety, or do you suggest additional steps consumers and clinicians take when evaluating supplements?
I think it's very worthwhile for brands that get into the dietary supplement industry to have a third-party certification. And the public should know that in order to go to market with a product, you also have to do testing. And part of your certificate of analysis testing that's done on your finished product before it's released to market is that you're below the thresholds for heavy metals. And that you, of course, are below the thresholds for various microbial concerns and things of human health safety. So products are tested for these things in their development stages. In general, the certification programs, whether it's NSF, whether it's Banned Substance Control Group, whether it is, another agency, they generally serve USP certified. They generally serve to verify that what is on the label is what's in the product. They're not there to necessarily testify to certify what's not in the product. So I do think that companies that use third-party certifications are another step of quality control, but that doesn't guarantee that they're going to be free of heavy metals or contaminants because they're allowed by the FDA, for example, up to 10 parts per billion. So there still may be in there, but they are being tested that they're meeting the FDA threshold. And also most of those certifications that they meet label claim are not testing for the presence of heavy metals and so forth. But for a consumer, I do think that it's good to look for products that have a third-party seal of approval. Because at least you know outside it's been tested for quality control outside the company. And it's another verification, if you will.
So from what I'm understanding, any supplement that is out currently for sale has already been tested for heavy metal and is well within underneath the FDA's maximum threshold. Is that correct?
Correct, or supposed to be.
Okay.
But by the Code of Federal Regulations, even 21 CFR 172 is where part of it is spelled out for a variety of heavy metals. There's also, I believe, 21 CFR Part 400 that also spells it out, but they're all basically the highest level, no more than 10 parts per billion. And so these are part of the product pre-testing before it goes to market that are done as part of standards under the Good Manufacturing Practices law or regulation. And GMP regulations are part of FDA oversight of the dietary supplement industry.
Now, why do you think the Clean Label Project did not disclose the brands that they tested?
Gut reaction with the healthy microbiome too is fear of lawsuits. That's the traditional reason why companies and various authors don't always name names in non-peer-reviewed articles and peer-reviewed articles is the fear of a lawsuit. Because then when you have a lawsuit, everything that you did that's part and parcel related to that suit comes under a microscope. So that's one of the weaknesses also of the article. Because you get an article like this, but then what's the real take-home for the consumer who reads the article? This one is a bad article. It's not doing anything good for health. Again, none of these named were a concern. Context matters. So the hot chocolate mix that I get from the supermarket is fine. But if I got, chocolate protein powder with the nutrition facts label on it, because most protein powders now have nutrition facts label, which by law mean that they're a food, they're not a supplement. It's not good. My kids' chocolate milk at school, or regular milk, or plant milk, protein bars, eating spinach, right? Anything that grows from the ground. I think context matters. I think Clean Label Project did not include names for fear of lawsuit. I don't blame them for that, but I think that they are. I think it's very written in a sensationalistic way and a non-helpful way.
So I had polled my audience because I told them I was going to be speaking with you, and I have a few questions that they asked. So one of them was, is there a way to check the products that we use? So she specifically asked about OWYN, the OWYN brand, and Fairlife. So I was curious, where would you direct consumers to maybe look up their own products?
Well, first, I would direct consumers to the companies that make the products and go to their website, see if they have a certificate of analysis or what information they share. Contact them and ask them, do you test for heavy metals? They're supposed to. And if they do, are you willing to share your results publicly? And then second, the FDA has a page that's called Testing Results for Arsenic, Lead, Cadmium, and Mercury. If you use that exact phrase, you'll get to the FDA website where the FDA maintains an ongoing database of foods that they've tested in the marketplace. So you click on their PDF or Excel file, whichever one you want to look at, and you're able to see, their data set. And if your food was tested by the FDA, it will be listed there.
Yeah, I'll definitely link that down below because I'm sure a lot of people would be very interested to go and search up their products that they're using. Now, along that same line, most of the questions that I got were asking for specific brands that you would recommend. So if you feel comfortable doing that, do you have 3 to 5 brands that you like that you would recommend for one of your clients that you would work with?
Well, that's a hard answer because, nothing should be construed as an endorsement per se.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that I do when I look at companies and I'm looking and considering recommending a product is for the company that makes it, how long have they been around? And the longer a company has been around typically indicates that they do good quality product, good quality control, good quality business, or else they wouldn't remain in business 20, 30, 40 years. So a brand like that, for example, would be like Optimum Nutrition. A popular protein they make is called Optimum Gold. But then the other thing that I look at the supplement facts panel. And on that panel, look at the serving size. So if the serving size says 40 grams or one scoop, 40 grams, and then look at the protein in the label. And if the protein says 25 grams, ask yourself, if I have a 40-gram scoop of one serving and I'm only getting 25 grams, what are those 15 other grams? And it's going to be either carbohydrates, fats, whatever else. However, if you're looking to buy a protein product, I like people to get where the grams of protein are as closest to the total grams of the serving. So you're actually getting more protein for the dollar that you're paying. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Right. So that's the way I try to teach people. First, look for that from a consumer standpoint. Then we could talk about, is there a difference in whey protein isolate, whey protein hydrolysate, whey protein concentrate, peak protein hydrolysate, rice protein concentrate, and all of that. I named the brand Optimum before as an example of a good quality brand, but there are a handful of or more of other good brands, whether it's Metrex, even the GNC or Vitamin Shop their own labeled product. They've been around for years. So to me, that's one of the easier ways of helping to ensure that you're getting a quality control product. I hope that is a helpful answer to you or somebody.
It is, absolutely. And I think that's the best way to choose a supplement, really, because it is going to be preference too, because we have to consider taste and texture and all the other things with that. Now, you kind of opened Pandora's box a little bit, and I know my listeners are going to be wanting a little bit more information about maybe the difference between whey and pea protein.
There's a great book, if you like Pandora's Box, that has a title, something along the lines of What's in Pandora's Lunchbox.
Okay.
And it's an expose kind of written book about food science and the food industry. Nice. It's a fascinating book, actually.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. You made me remember that book well.
That's awesome. Okay. I'll link to that down below too for anybody who's interested in learning about that. But I do want to pick your brain. I want to pause and hear about the different types of protein. Obviously, like pea, soy, rice, whey. I mean, we've got a lot of options and why one might pick one versus the other. So I'm just curious your thoughts on the differences there, if you have an opinion about which one is better. And then if you wanted to unpack the isolate versus concentrate, hydrolysate, because that can get a little confusing for those who are not protein supplement experts.
Sure. I'll try it in an easy, best way that I can. When we're talking about proteins that are made from dairy, right, made from milk, it's easiest to start off by remembering part of a nursery rhyme. Little Miss Muffet had her curds and whey, right? So if we think about it, where does whey come from? Whey comes from milk. Well, if whey comes from milk, what else comes from milk? There's another class of proteins known as casein proteins. Actually, the curdled proteins come from casein. They don't come from whey. An at-home science test that you can do is you could take a small cup of milk and you can cut up a lemon and you can squeeze lemon juice into the milk. And you're going to watch the milk curdle. And the more that the milk curdles, gets like these little like cheese-like chunks in them. The chunks are curds, which are part of casein and used in like cottage cheese. And the liquid portion is actually whey protein. Now, both of those components of dairy are complete proteins. And whey protein, so just taking a step back, and this might even be a step aside. When a woman is breastfeeding a child, breast milk is very rich in the portion of whey, like 60% whey and 40% casein. When we drink cow's milk, we're also getting a proportion of whey and casein, but different than naturally occurs from breast milk. So ingesting whey is something that is natural from the time of birth. for any baby that breastfeeds. Whey protein itself contains a lot of immunoglobulins and other kind of proteins and protein fractions that are supportive of immune system, not only the ability to quote unquote make muscle or maintain muscle. So getting into whey protein for a little bit, there's a little bit of food science. In the food science world, the FDA actually has definitions for what equals a concentrate and what equals an isolate and what equals a hydrolysate. In order for any protein to be qualified as a concentrate, whey protein concentrate, that means that it needs to be like 70 to 80% protein by weight. Isolates are traditionally 90% protein by weight and higher. So you ask in one way, what is the difference? There are very minute differences, but basically with an isolate, you're getting a little bit more protein than you are from a concentrate because other things are filtered out. Some of our vitamins and other things that actually take space when you put it into powder form. And so whey protein concentrate will be rich in lactose, will have a variety of vitamins, will have some carbohydrate in it from the lactose, and is overall on a gram per gram basis less protein. A whey protein isolate has less lactose, all the way to zero lactose, and as a greater concentration of the other things, but again, low on the lactose. So for some people, whey protein isolate that are lactose intolerant or lactase deficient, they have no problem with whey protein isolate, but whey protein concentrate gives, their stomach the blues, right? So concentrates and isolates actually have an FDA regulation, and it's related to the percent protein by weight. And that's true for whether it's a plant protein or a food protein. Now, whey protein can also be hydrolyzed. And when we talk about what is hydrolysis, that is where instead of the protein being the intact protein and naturally occurring from the milk, it's actually now broke down into peptides, dipeptides, tripeptides. And so the thought is that if you're having whey protein hydrolysates, that will actually be absorbed faster than whey protein isolate or whey protein concentrate. And I will say from a medical perspective, the whey protein hydrolysates in general are sometimes utilized in tube feedings of enteral nutrition with the thought that they're going to be absorbed faster and help healing faster than other protein sources. The data doesn't really, in the big picture, show that much of a difference that would be worthy of the expense of the whey protein hydrolysates. I don't know if that confuses you for what you're looking for, but I hope that is helpful. Whey comes from milk. Whey protein concentrate is is less than 90%, around 80% protein by weight. The isolates are more than that by weight, usually 90, 93%. And as that occurs, you're getting more protein and less vitamins, ash, and lactose.
No, it was a really helpful explanation. And I think it's important for people to understand what they're purchasing. And I actually created an infographic about this. So if you guys wanted to grab it, it's totally free. Just go to examroomnutrition.com/protein, and I'll send you a really helpful breakdown of protein supplements where I unpack the different terminology there. Now, for someone who is still concerned about heavy metal contamination, would you consider or would you suggest that a whey protein supplement is safer for that person? Would you suggest whey for everybody? Or do you still think plant-based protein supplements are safe and appropriate for someone if they wanted to go that route?
I think the freedom of choice, right, for what an individual decides that they want to try or utilize, because also taste matters too, that both the dairy-based protein products as well as the vegetarian-based protein products are fine and healthy and fair to use now. There's no reason not to include them as part of your overall diet. And so whether it is a vegetarian protein or a whey protein, I encourage either of them. It's interesting to note, while we do have an overweight and an obesity issue in this country, and so with that, a lot of people in medicine think that means, well, people are taking in more than enough protein. still by the dietary guidelines for Americans and recent NANs, up to 50% of women are not meeting their protein needs. So why would we want to scare people about protein sources when we still have a protein insufficiency intake issue for, about 50% of women? And we know that protein is your backbone for your immune system, for muscle health. Our bodies don't make neurotransmitters without their precursors. So you don't get adequate essential amino acid intake. You're not going to make serotonin. You're not going to make norepinephrine, epinephrine, and so forth. So I think protein is a topic that needs to be discussed for its health positive impacts. And this unfortunate clean label project did a disservice.
What a great place to end. Before I let you go, are there any final thoughts or anything else that you think our listeners should know about this article or protein supplements in general?
In general, when thinking about protein supplement, let's concentrate for every word supplement. Supplement means in addition to. So that's in addition to what you're getting from food. If you think that you need to get more protein, work with a registered dietitian and figure out about how can I change maybe some of my food choices. So, for example, we have regular milk, and you mentioned earlier Fairlife milk. Fairlife milk has an extra 4 grams of protein per serving. I think it's 12 grams per 8 ounces, where general milk is 8 grams. And then there's derivatives of Fairlife milk that are sold that are even higher, having 30 to 40 grams of protein per serving. So that is a food, and that's another way of getting it in. From a supplement perspective, they help fill in the gaps. So to me, if something is labeled as a dietary supplement and it's a protein powder, I utilize those to add to the foods that I'm eating where I know the protein portion is in it where I might want it to be. So I might sprinkle it on cereal or into cereal, may mix it into pancakes, may make my own little version of a sludge. So there are a variety of ways, but first work with an RD to look at your food intake and then how you can modulate that. And I'm all for, somebody taking at least, even I have my own mom do this. She has at least one protein shake per day. It's part of her ritual. Yes, she's going to eat, but she knows that sometimes in the afternoon, it could be quite a few hours before she does anything, but she's going to take the dog for a walk. So she's going to have a protein drink. So I think it has its role in helping people meet their goals, and that working with RDs are a great way to learn how to personalize nutrition.
Perfect place to end, because I am all about promoting registered dietitians on this show. Thank you so much for letting me pick your brain and for coming on with such short notice and discussing this really, really important topic. I always love having you on here. So thanks again for being here.
My pleasure, Colleen. Thank you for allowing me to share some insights.